I got my water. Keep us, you need one.
Kia ora everybody, what's up? It is Robett, and I'm joined by Richard Dellabarca. How are you, my friend?
I'm very good, thank you. Very good.
Let's get straight into it. You are a big, heavy hitter in the world of New Zealand business. You may not be seen so much publicly as many others, but let's just go through some of these. Non-executive director, Auckland Blues, board at NZ Rugby, chairman and co-founder Pocketwise, non-executive director of Harmony, and the CEO of New Zealand Venture Investment Fund. So just a couple of things.
Yes. And father of 3 young kids who may or may not come running through this door, by the way. So I apologise if that interferes.
Trust me, with the way I think the world is working now, everyone is used to absolutely everything.
All right. Okay.
How intense has your emails and phones been going off for all the different things you're involved with in the last 2 weeks? Where's everyone's headspace at, and at a board level, how are you navigating the priorities of what you know needs to happen?
Yeah, gee, those are not trivial questions, are they?
Yeah, that's why I told you to get the whiskey.
Yeah, there we go.
Okay, we'll start one back.
We'll start, yeah.
Where are you and how's things?
I'm very good, thank you. I think to answer your question, look, the intensity of everything is just off the scale, isn't it? It's quite remarkable times we're going through, and so I'm sure everyone else you've spoken to says. And very difficult times because, look, it's unprecedented what's happened. The world has literally stopped. If I look at New Zealand rugby, for example, the economic model underpinning rugby has collapsed within a couple of weeks. I mean, we can't play games. You can't have crowds attend. That is very challenging for your broadcaster. It's very challenging for your sponsors. And certainly, a good chunk of our revenue comes from gate taking. So you go from a $200 million business to, the other thing is we're quite uncertain where you resume business. So the uncertainty about what you can do in the future is also challenging. And, the same thing, with Harmony, the consumer lender. We've just raised a significant amount of equity in October last year. So really well positioned going into this. I'd hate to have have this occur before we raise that money. So we've got a great team and a great amount of capital behind us, but a lot of uncertainty around economic conditions and when the world will come out of this.
Yeah, it's a funky one too, because obviously from the dollar side, every single day can be worth in the tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars for every single cash flow and P&L potentially with what's going to come back online, and then you almost have to almost roll the dice thinking about what's going to get staged at what time to come back in the funnel, and then you probably need to simultaneously. We were lucky enough we had the bro from Sean, the CEO of SBS Bank, on earlier today, and just saying there's only so much wiggle room that each sort of business has, and then trying to balance that the entire time when there's lives and mortgages on the ropes, and what the government's been doing. He was obviously with the new they're coming out saying lending up to $500,000 for these businesses, capped at I think it was up to 80% the government would sort of kick it back at. And you think of all these sort of things, but then simultaneously you stop and you're like, shit, if the business could be dead in 6 months, alive in 3, at what point is death day or go day or pause or whatever? How have you navigated the I guess the virtual emotional balancing of leaders? You obviously sit on boards, CEOs talk to you, all these other execs, and now as I'm imagining time as a board position, it's how are you supporting your leaders in these different organizations? How are you navigating that? Because I'm sure you're getting phone calls at all middle of the night and a million different time zones. How are you navigating all that?
Look, I think the first thing is, and I had the, misfortune of going through the GFC, where I was co-founder of a company where we went from 380 people to 40 people, which was a very brutal life experience. And every one of those 380 people I'd hired, I personally knew their partners and their kids, and we'd built a company over 8 years. So, look, I think the first thing I try to do, and I have tried to do, is just remain calm. These are not, you've just got to remain calm and work through problems. And I think the biggest challenge I've seen is uncertainty. Uncertainty for CEOs, uncertainty for employees, just uncertainty about when life can restart, both socially. When can I get out of this house? And, when can business restart?
You're missing some beers with the boys, mate.
Yeah. We got a few street beers today, actually. We're going to do that. But one of the challenges is if you're trying to financially model, scenarios going forward, because, everyone's looking at their business now and their cost structure and saying, well, Can I reduce headcount? Can I reduce salaries? Can I reduce variable and fixed costs? But also, you just don't know when life restarts, and that's the biggest challenge, the uncertainty. So you can model 100 different scenarios, but you don't know which one's going to apply.
Yeah,
and so I think that's a really difficult thing to juggle for CEOs and for boards. In my day job, I run the New Zealand Growth Capital Partners Fund, which is a sort of $430 million fund. We've got 260 portfolio companies, all early stage technology companies, and huge degree of uncertainty for those. A lot of those companies, they rely on future funding in most respects, and many of them, so they're largely pre-revenue. So there's uncertainty for them whether they can raise further capital to get through this. For companies that have got sort of early revenues, many of them are sort of in the product development phase with customers as opposed to a product line. So, enterprises are cutting back on product development and just focusing on core revenue streams. So that's a real impact on those companies. So just real uncertainty, I think, is the real challenge.
Yeah, maybe just that tech space for a second. Obviously, a lot of these businesses, especially in the B2B, SaaS type play environments, all of those different types of onboarding, which have directly changed the valuation of these companies, would have almost gone to zero overnight, and so many of these different things. And and when these different, I guess, systems push pause, they must just get like, how do you even value that? I mean, you either have to, exactly to your point, bring on more investment and what, dilute your way out of it or grow your way out of it, right? Based on where they're at for their different customer base. That's going to be tough for these founders to get through, right? What are you telling them right now?
Well, I've literally got a call in an hour with a company that's, and I won't disclose who it is. They had $100 million of revenue, which has gone to zero in 4 weeks. Their entire business. Yes, yeah. Now they're trying to figure out how to pivot to become a virtual. Well, it's a business centered around the gatherings of people.
Got it.
So obviously that's off the agenda, and so they're trying to figure out how to become virtual. But the brutal reality of that is, one, they have a concern about cash. So how do they have a cash runway to get through the next 18, 24 months? Certainly valuation of that business is a concern, but the reality is, ongoing viability of the business is the first concern. But I think valuation also impacts existing investors. So if you've gone and invested in a company at $200 million and all of a sudden that business is now worth zero or close to it, that's a massive issue for investors to deal with as well. So do they double down and try and continue through this, or do they cut their losses and run? And they're probably managing any number of portfolio companies as well going through the same scenario. So the downstream effects of this are quite catastrophic, actually.
Yeah, just then from an investor side, right? Like you place a whole bunch of small little bets all over the show. Your company's valued at 100 million overnight, it's worth zero. And then if you're trying to dilute your way out of it instead of grow, if you don't have the customers already, then those first round guys are just going to get pumped. I guess they're going to get first dibs at it, but it's like, wait a second. So I had to flip and chuck in 10 mil at this valuation, and now I've got to do that for what? So at what point do you think, okay, let's not say the founders, but the investors in these group, will their initial kickoff for the next 12 months say, okay, what is essential services or those that can pivot that will still be relevant and viable in the market today? And then literally everything else, we don't have the cash flow to support it because we don't know when that world's coming back. Like, where's the headspace at from an investor's side? Because I can almost imagine that's probably the only move you can do, because they won't have the cash flow to hold up a bunch of these companies who can't get customers within the next 12 months, surely, right?
Yeah, look, I think there's multiple questions there. I mean, if you assume a traditional fund, one of their challenges will be, will their investors into that fund continue to give them money to invest? So they may well be facing consequences with investors pulling their money out of their fund. So that's one thing to consider for them. I think the second thing is, a traditional PE or VC with, let's say, between 15 and 25 investments, they will be now trying to consider their portfolio and triage and figure out which ones they allocate their remaining capital into to save or create value. And it'll be quite a brutal exercise, brutal for everybody. And a number of companies will get closed down or go into skeleton staff. Our approach we're taking with companies we're looking at the moment, our portfolio or new companies coming to us is, can we ensure they're funded through the next 18 or 24 months, assuming no revenue? So can we cover their cost structure for 18 to 24 months? And also, is the group of co-investors we're investing in, do they have significant balance sheets? So at the end of 18 or 24 months, they can reinvest again and help rebuild the company or take it forward without getting external capital in. So we're not relying on the fact that external money will come in the next 24 months. because that's a very uncertain bet. So,
Yeah,
so that's probably the thinking we're trying to apply at the moment.
Because you almost wonder from the other side, a lot of investors are going to have to, put that filter through to see what ones they let die and what ones continue on, or if they can restructure it to keep the existing capital in the business to survive through the other side without investment, so it doesn't get too devalued from the investor side. But on the other side, I'm kind of thinking about it. If I was, if you had a couple of $100 million roll around, obviously, which you do, and you're looking at it another way, I'm imagining one of the strategies of some of these crew will be like, okay, what IP can I get for cents on the dollar? What great talent can I get on cents of way cheaper that will be free and clear and pulled together at some type of new portfolio of either thinking or IP or brand to wait it out? Would that be some of the thinking that some of the investors might have to think of it to actually come through and just roll up a whole bunch of shit, which is now going to be cheaper?
Look, no doubt, I'm naturally an optimist, so I see these crises or environments as a great opportunity. And so, if you look at some of the great companies that came out of the GFC in 2007, 2008, there's a huge amount of value to be created. And a lot of VCs made a lot of money out of that period because they had balance sheets to invest in either new opportunities. And also, when you're starting a business, it's a lot cheaper to start a business. Labor is probably cheaper than what it was 12 to 24 months ago, and everything around building a business is probably a lot cheaper. There will be a lot of opportunities. There'll be a lot of change. A lot of business models will collapse and be rebuilt in a different way. And as you said, there'll be a lot of assets that were previously valued at probably loftier valuations they deserve, which will now be a lot cheaper. And one of the unfortunate rules I learned going through the last GFC was he who has the capital defines the capital structure going forward. And so last money in defines the capital structure. And in many cases, unfortunately, if you're an early investor and you can't follow your money, you'll probably get wiped out and the opportunity to be recapitalized. That'll be some of the consequences of this, unfortunately.
Yeah. It's a friend of mine's in the real estate game up the food chain, and he was just saying, he was like, mate, millionaires are stressing, billionaires are hyped. And I was like, what? He's like, well, think about it, like the millionaires are buying and flipping every year or two and this and that, and the billionaires, so the other guys are playing a yearly game, and then the billionaires, they play decades. So they last played really heavy, exactly to your point, Rich, like 08, 09 come through, steamroll a whole bunch of shit, and distressed assets rolled up. They had enough cash flow to see it out to the other side, and they get the wins, and then. Yeah, and he was like, maybe exactly to your point as well. It's the mindset that they take into it with how they approach that. I've got a bro here, Tim. Oh, Tim, what's up, Tim? CEO and co-founder of Ambit says, I love to hear what new approaches VIF is using to help companies right now. There you go, Timbo.
That's a good question, Tim. New approaches. Look, I think we have two programs. One is the seed fund, which we invest in early stage startups, and that's got about $50 million of cash. Our challenge with our model there, and so we don't really have a new approach as such. Forgive me, one of my kids is going to come in. Hey, bud, don't worry about it.
The blues.
You go play. That's right.
We've had all sorts on the show, bro. Don't stress.
I'm sure we have. That's right. Look, I don't think we're there's nothing new we're doing. We're just still open for business, which I think if you look at a lot of the private institutions and high net worths and angel investors, it's probably not the case in New Zealand right now. A lot of people are a lot more cautious. The challenge for us is we have a cap of about $12 million we can invest per year. I think our year ends June 30th this year, so we've invested about $9.3 million. About $1 million in the last week, I would add, two $500,000 investments. So our challenge is twofold. One, we'll probably hit the cap sooner than the end of the year because of just increased deal flow and demand. And the second challenge is that ours is a public-private model. So, for example, I'm making the numbers up. If we want to invest $500,000 in a company, we need the private sector to contribute $500,000 in that round as well. So if the private sector drops back to $100,000 going to that company, the maximum we can invest is $100,000, even though we may have a higher conviction for the opportunity. So that's exactly all the cash sitting there. So that's a challenge around our model. And on the venture side of things, we've just launched the Elevate Venture Fund, which is a $300 million fund of funds. So we invest in new funds. We've only been going a month, and actually we've got 11 applications in that program already, which is far more than we anticipated. So that's very positive for the ecosystem. And a number of those funds appear to have already raised private capital or very close to it. So we're hopeful that we can work with those to allocate capital into them such that they can get into the ecosystem and start investing. And, hopefully we'll have that done by June. There are certain processes as a government entity you have to work through with public money. But that's what we're trying to achieve there. So Yeah, I don't think there's anything new there, but yeah, we're open for business and continuing to the extent we can within our mandates.
There you go, Timbo's absolute good bastard at the career. Ambit Anthony McNaughton, the bro. Hey, Robert, investors are critically assessing existing portfolios, looking at which companies to support and which ones to cut off funding. At the same time, some VCs and family offices have substantial cash on hand and are using this as an opportunity to make some great investments at more attractive valuations. He's the bro.
Look, I can only just concur with that. That's probably, we're seeing early signs of that, and no doubt, to our earlier point, those with capital will probably have some great opportunities to invest in some very good valuations.
What sector are you most worried about out of all? Like zoom out from investments, look at NZVIF to the world. What's the bit that you're just like, oh shit? And maybe not so much just for the next year, but that could potentially change the course of history for a certain vertical industry in New Zealand.
Gosh, that's a big question, isn't it?
That's what I'm here to do, mate. Professional.
I think let me try and probably not answer the question very well for you, but what's been remarkable for me is how much almost every strand of the economy has been impacted by this, but also the speed of which it's been impacted. Like, in New Zealand's gone from a $6 billion revenue business to right? So
500 mil, whatever, like 500
yeah,
off the books.
New Zealand rugby, boom, our business models essentially collapsed. Every sporting organisation's essentially collapsed. The NRL, the AFL, EPL. Look, hey, you want to be in the food business at the moment, clearly. You want to be in the supermarket business. Essentials, electricity, water.
Maslow shit, just go straight to like housing, food, flipping hospitals, water.
Yeah. So retail, hospitality, just devastated overnight, haven't they? So very challenging. Look, I would say we should give credit to the government. I think their leadership and the agility they've led has been quite remarkable. And I'm working with the government on a few things, and super impressed with how deep they're digging in their pockets to help the economy, and recognising that the economy and business is quite important to getting out of this as well.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that, because the first wave went straight to the employers, I guess, and then the second wave coming for the employees. Not employees first, employers now. The timing of, because from the outside, when you look at it, when the moves of, this is going to happen, and then there's going to be this for the business, this is going to happen, this is going to be for the employees. The timing of how they've placed each piece has really managed to keep a pretty unified level of calm with the headspaces, not only from the public, but also from employees and employer side. What's been the one thing you think that New Zealand's done really good compared to other parts of the world that you're just like, shit, I'm so pumped that she did this, or that the crew did that? What's the bit that you've just been like on it?
Oh, I think there's a number of parts, to be honest. I think our Prime Minister has been extraordinary in this time. So full credit there. I think Grant Robinson's been extraordinary as well. And Adrian Orr. I think, as I said, I think the agility of which they've moved and been responsive has been really impressive, and some of the things I see continue to be impressive. I'll just give you a working example. Like I was party to an email that went to Adrian Orr at, let's say, 3:00 on Sunday afternoon, so 2 days ago.
Don't get yourself told off, mate. I don't want anyone to file on shit.
No. But he responded to that within 20 minutes on a Sunday afternoon, and copied a number of people in, and there was action following from that on Monday morning. And this is the governor of the Reserve Bank. So, look, I just think it's just been, every response has been super impressive. And I'm sure with the benefit of hindsight, they haven't got everything right, but they've done a very, very good job. And they're very open to ideas and initiatives from the private sector to help them through this as well.
It
sounds really impressive as well.
It sounds like there's been a few crew that have been pulled in for just a few pretty quick chats at the top to ask them stuff, and that which is quite cool to see. It doesn't feel like it's been, we're here to save this, hey, stuff you, this is the way it's done. It's genuinely like, hey, would this make sense if we did this? Hey, what do you think about that? Yep,
that's my read of it. That's
cool. Dude, flipping Jacinda's gonna have the hell book to write in about 10 years. Just how to deal with this shit, this shit.
Yeah, it's quite remarkable, actually, isn't it? But you're going to predict it. But no, I think everyone in government and officialdom, by the way, the people under ministers, the officials, just working tremendously hard and doing, I think, a great job.
Anthony jumped back in because he's a bit of a money weapon himself.
Mm.
A vulnerable sector, banking in Europe. Some banks have not fully recovered from the GFC. Margins have been squeezed. Bad debts will be rising. Potential for another credit crisis. Need for a massive consolidation as markets like Italy and Germany are incredibly fragmented. Yep.
Yeah, look, just way above my pay grade. But you'd have to concur with that, wouldn't you? I mean, what I think struck me, the GFC was a financial markets crisis. This is a sort of real world, real asset crisis, real businesses. And I think the flow on will impact the banking sector and the financial markets in due course. Again, I think the government's doing a great job of supporting the banking system, at least the licensed banking system. I think non-bank lenders are next in line and they'll need a huge amount of support as well. But I think in New Zealand, we're reasonably well placed with the very well capitalised banks and a pretty sound structure, you'd hope. But we are a little boat floating on a big sea, and so whatever happens offshore is going to no doubt impact on us.
Probably exactly to that point, one of the things both we're talking about earlier today was the idea of after this is going to be this probably big push to I'm calling it like hyper local resiliency around supporting the mega local cafe blah blah. And then talking to Carmen before from Velocity, she said, well, if every country does the exact same thing, are they actually essentially going to build up virtual walls against what else could be there for the rest of the world? And how do you think New Zealand then navigates to be resilient to ourselves but still open for business to everyone else when they'll probably be thinking the same thing? Because it's going to be kind of like a funky political tango between we're all in this together because we're human, but at the same time I need to look out for number one, but at the same time I need your money to help survive. Like that, there's going to be this weird, I'm predicting this funky tension that's going to happen at the top. What's your buzz there?
Yeah, look, I think two takeaways on that. I think everyone at the moment is talking about community and supporting your local suppliers, and I think that's great. And I really hope that when we go back to normal, that actually you do see behavioural change. A whole pile of things here. And I hope we just don't revert to type in time. From a sort of social, the way we operate socially. I think I agree with Carmen. Real concerns. Like I saw something on, I can't remember what it was, but it was essentially one of the leaders in the US talking about the fact that they've become overly reliant on the offshore markets to supply them with core things like respirators and masks and all those things, and they need to go back to American made. So very much reinforcing the Trump agenda. And you do feel like around the world that those similar agendas have got more weight now in those conversations, and that could impact sort of globalization and free trade and things like that.
Because it can, for many that are running those political games, it can hide the guise of togetherness and resiliency, but in reality, it's just the power shift back to build Detroit 2.0, really, right?
Yes, yeah. Look, these are all about politics and powers and people, aren't they?
I know. Yeah.
But there'd be a concern, and as a country, which I think we're a net exporter, I think we rely on overseas trade quite significantly. That could be a challenge for us. I just don't know where that will be, but that could be a challenge.
So let's go back to something which we're both extremely ridiculously passionate about. Not alcohol, not whiskey, especially not you with the whiskey. Sport.
Sport, yes.
Fuck. So we had Budgie on the show on Friday, and he was wondering, at what point does the government actually step in to realize, that there needs to be a more collective approach to bring this thing back? Is the model broken? How does it all shift? And for those obviously who don't know the 101s to this thing, in a nutshell, when there is no sport, no players get paid, no TV gets created, no content gets done, no ads get sold, absolutely everything goes to zero, regardless, even if you're the All Blacks, if no one can even play, right? How do you think at a macro level this has impacted sport globally, financially, and where does the new world of sport actually sit? Because it's almost going to shake the entire tree to rebuild from the ground back up, not just for rugby, for absolutely everything of what you said. How's this stuffed up sport?
Oh, look, it's been, I hope I'm not being dramatic, but it's been quite catastrophic to the economic model. I would correct you on what you've just said in a way. Games stop, players don't get paid, staff don't get paid, et cetera, et cetera. Actually, what happens is your revenue is very variable, but a lot of your cost structure is fixed. So
do you still have to pay the players, even without playing?
Well, yes, you do, because they're employees. Right? It's like you're paying someone a salary. So
who fronts that? The TV rights? How does that?
No. So look, if you, I'm being very simplistic, so these
Right.
aren't accurate numbers, but let's assume you earn $100 a year, and a third of that comes from broadcast, a third from gates, and a third from sponsors. Well, you've had someone like Sky who's, going through some very difficult times, and so they've been a massive supporter of New Zealand rugby and continue to be. But they're facing a challenge model at the moment because they can't provide their subscribers with live content, content which people pay for. But I understand subscribers have been very supportive to them, which is great to hear. A third of the revenue is maybe gate from playing games, but obviously you're not playing games, so you've got no gate. And then a third of your revenue is from sponsors. So, and quite rightly, a lot of sponsors are in distress as well. So they're looking at, are we getting the exposure we pay for? And, is there a force majeure clause, or should we have a rediscussion? So, we're promoting everything at the moment, however we can.
The PR team's not watching this, mate. It's fine.
No,
I think my mum's tuned in. It's fine.
Sure. But, the flip side is you've got to, I'll make it up again, $100 a cost structure. And a lot of that is fixed, right? A lot of that is, paying players, playing staff, supporting the provincial unions, supporting the super clubs. And these aren't costs that go away overnight, although a lot of your revenue has. So that's the challenge you've got, is you've got to go back and address your cost structure. And as Mark Robinson said at New Zealand Rugby CEO, and he's doing a tremendous job, by the way, remarkable job. Unfortunately, everyone's got to share the burden. And so those are very challenging discussions to go through with everybody. And that's what you've got to work through. But rugby will come out of this. They've gone through some, Great Depression, World Wars, and rugby will come back. And I think the great thing, if there is a good thing at the moment, is it seems to have unified rugby and the rugby community.
How so?
For the greater good. Everyone has their own agendas and their own corners they're boxing for. But at the end of the day, everyone's coming together to support New Zealand Inc. and New Zealand Rugby to get the sport through. And I think the other thing that's become really interesting for us to observe is actually I think the general community has appreciated how important live events are to them, be they arts, culture, sport. The ability to socially gather and follow a sport or go to theatre or all these things. I think I hope we'll have an appreciation of how important they are, and I hope we'll see that in New Zealand Rugby, see greater crowds coming to support club rugby, schools, our provincial unions, and super clubs and the All Blacks. And I think the All Black brand is I think it's a really important brand to New Zealand Inc. in New Zealand. I think it's probably the greatest brand we have globally, and I hope we can help the government and New Zealand Inc. Do our small part to get us back on our feet as well.
Interesting point there about the experience side. I've been thinking about, will minimalism make more of a comeback? Will consumerism, die down a little bit in terms of, fast fashion retail shit? And people are just like, man, let's go experience these things again. And what feels like it is happening, it's been a pause moment for humanity when we realize we miss people.
Yes.
High fives, handshakes, beers, eye contact, sit down. That human connection is so just intrinsically bound. It's almost gone primal for as tech as it has, And right when it happened, I had a mini prediction, and I sort of said, I think we'll see the biggest wave of music and artists and comedians and creatives all come out of this, because when you put people that create into a confined space and just force them into a thing, that's exactly what happens, and all these sort of great ideas and innovation comes out of it. So I think humanity net hopefully will come out of it with new ways to think about it and approach. But from a sports side, nationally, say nationally, how do you rebuild financially? Do you change the model? Do you look at how do you even approach how do you strategically approach rebuilding an entire thing back from arguably pause, if not zero, at this very second? How do you do it?
Yeah, look, I think that's a great question, and there's a couple of components I'd say is, first you've got to get through this year, and New Zealand Rugby will get through this year, and we'll come out with cash in the bank. And we need that because we think next year will be very difficult. So, for example, if we're in level 2 for, let's say, 12 to 18 months, or there's no international travel, that means a very limited agenda for us to generate revenue from the All Blacks, for example, with international test matches. So we're trying to think through 2021 and how we get the New Zealand Rugby ecosystem through that as well, because I don't think our revenue levels will be next year what they were last year. Yeah, so, totally. We can't think that we'll revert back to type. So there's a rebuild that's going to take time there. I think, and so we have existing revenue streams of broadcast, gates and sponsorship. The other thing we've been working on for the last couple of years is really generating new revenue streams. So non-traditional revenue streams. And so we've been searching around the world for things that we can do, because this brand is fantastic in that it transcends rugby, and arguably it transcends sport as well, when you think about our high performance and what we've done over the last 100 years. So we've got a number of ideas around new revenue streams and new business opportunities we can pursue with this brand that don't rely on us playing games, through a lot of digital channels, are hopefully epically scalable as well. So if you think about the business model we've historically had, we've probably saturated a market of 4.5 million people, but we've got a market of 7.8 billion people out there that we really should be chasing. And so that's the great opportunity to pursue. Will we have the capital to fund ourselves into those new opportunities will be the challenge. So we want to build new revenue streams to sit alongside the revenue streams we have to rebuild. I think the other thing is we're very asset light. In fact, we're incredibly asset light. If you think about it, you want to be the landlord, not the tenant, don't you? And at the moment, we're the tenant in many respects. So we've got cash in our bank account, but we haven't got assets supporting our business. And so we've got to think through how we become a lot more valuable in terms of assets, such that we can weather the next storm that will occur. And these always come, don't they? So that's a challenge, to perhaps rebuild our business in a different way, such that we become a lot more asset orientated, and build more sustainable revenue streams where we're not reliant on external parties.
It's a good way to think about it. I was lucky enough, NZ Rugby did its 2030 big future looking project. I think it was like 2 years ago. So I was lucky enough to be in the room for that. And, one of the things was the globalization of it. Look at, American football and basketball, blah, blah, blah. And then exactly what something just hit on, I think there, Rich, was the idea of, if it's a global issue, it's also a global opportunity.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Global challenge. We're all on the same boat. It's like, okay, well, how do you use this moment to redefine it? We were talking to Clive Omerod, who's the CEO of Les Mills, and he was saying, mate, our game plan didn't change at all. Our strategy was exactly the same. All that happened is we went 3 years and 3 days, 3 weeks, And so then you kind of like, man, this is a great opportunity to be braver, to push a strategy forward with where you want to go and what you want to do, potentially for what the future of sport, All Blacks, any business, whatever can actually be, right? It's actually a massive opportunity depending on the mindset you take into it.
Well, I think that's right. I would also suggest you don't have an option. You've got to, you just don't have an option. Sorry, excuse me.
No, you're right.
Just do that. They're playing games on my phone, so when it rings, I get a bit worried. Look, I think there's a great opportunity that will come out of this for New Zealand rugby, and we will get through this. The All Blacks will continue to be the premier rugby brand globally, and for us, we want to rebuild the super competition. We think that is the best rugby in the world. It's just probably not the best competition, and we also have 26 provincial unions, which have been the cornerstone of New Zealand rugby for the last greater than 125 years, and so we want to make sure that they're financially sustainable and can get through this and come out the other side as well. So we've got to think positively about this and just got to get through the short term, which we will.
Yeah, I think as soon as that, it's just amplified and sped up the strategy for taking the business to a new level, right? That's all it's really done, because these are the same conversations that were being had, for a couple of years now. So it's almost the perfect opportunity to be able to do it.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Before we go, obviously I know you're tapped and you've got the CEO of everyone ringing you right now to try and get your time. What gets you hopeful about this next wave for New Zealand, NZ Inc. to the world? You've got your fingers in sport and business and government, all sorts of stuff. Like, what do you want to see? Have a dream scenario? Do your little flipping Dellabarca sprinkly dust shit? What does good look like?
Yeah, no, my sort of passion is, the reason I'm involved in New Zealand Growth Capital Partners, or what was New Zealand Venture Fund, is I've been in technology and startups since 2003 when I started my own company over in the UK. And I've just been astounded by the quality of entrepreneurs coming out of New Zealand and the nonlinear growth in startups we're seeing. And so for me, the big gap has always been getting the capital to these entrepreneurs to give them a chance to succeed on the global stage. And hopefully what we're doing with New Zealand Growth Capital Partners is contributing in a small way to helping these entrepreneurs. But I think the future, well, not the future of New Zealand, but a big chunk of New Zealand's success going forward will come from the early stage ecosystem and the companies being built now. I mean, if you look back over the last 10 years, we've produced $12 billion companies. Not too many people know that. We all know Xero and Trade Me, but there's PushPay, there's Rocket Lab, there's Anaplan, there's Allbirds. All these ideas have come out of New Zealand now, multi-billion-dollar companies. So I think it's incumbent on us to, support and build the next generation of entrepreneurs and get the right capital around them and the right talent, and see if we can grow more billion-dollar companies out of this country. And there's no doubt in the next 10 years we'll have more than $12 billion companies come out this year if we do it right. So New Zealand's a great place to grow a business. And I'm really hopeful that'll be a key part of rebuilding New Zealand after this.
Yeah. If you're a young buck in the tech game, I think we were saying, tech was, I think it's on track to be the second biggest export in New Zealand within the next 18 months or something. What advice would you give a young buck now? Right now in this climate, you're a startup, you're a small business owner, you're looking at this world of tech, and what would your 2 cents be to those crew?
Look, I think, that's a good question, isn't it? One, this is a very viable career path. You may not get it right the first or second time, but, statistically, fourth or fifth time is a high probability to succeed. I think the second thing is you need tremendous resilience in this. And, this will be very trying times, but there'll be a huge amount of opportunity come out of this. And New Zealand is now not too disadvantaged by its geographical dislocation here. So you can build some great companies out of New Zealand, as we've seen, and you just got to get out there and hustle and get on a plane. So it's a great period, I think, to be an entrepreneur. I'd certainly encourage that over being, no offense to lawyers or accountants or bankers, but and it's a lot more fun. Yeah, so.
No, mega, bro. Well, look, I appreciate your time, Rich. I know you're tapped and you got a million things to do. We'll catch up soon for a beer. Be good, stay out of trouble, and thanks for all you're doing for NZVIF, bro. It's mega.
Yeah, no, thank you for the opportunity, and thanks for all you're doing for NZVIF, by the way, as well. I think these are great people.
I'm doing this and talking shit. This doesn't count as a national service, all right, Rich?
Desperate times call for desperate measures. So we'll take everything we can get at the moment. Thanks.
I win by default. Sure, brother. See you soon, bro.
Thank you.
Later.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Flipping big dog, Richard Dellabarca. Bored of flipping everything. Awesome time to get in the mix. And I think the mindset piece is really interesting with what Richard was talking about, with how you approach things. Really cool. Really cool. Colleen Edwards says, great conversation. Good chat. Awesome. Good work, Tim. Thanks to Tim for tuning in. Anthony, for your 2 cents, as usual. It's really appreciated. Those who don't know, Anthony McNaughton, absolute weapon, and boss dogger in the investment space. He knows a thing or two as well. So big up to Rich, Mr. Dellabarca, joining us today. Man, heavy day. Brains left, right, and centre. It's been flipping great. What a good bastard. I'll be saying. He's got a big thing. He actually can't have whiskey, so that's why I was drinking on his behalf. See you soon, team. Adios. Deuces.